Asia. And I want to send a special thanks to Professor Mohan Trivedi and his family for funding this event. And also congratulations on your retirement. Your students and colleagues are so grateful for your continued support and guidance through the years. I also want to thank our co-sponsors, the Division of Social Sciences, the Department of Communication, and the International House, especially Julian and Adam. Thank you so much. And I want to thank, And I also want to thank everyone who worked behind the scenes, the South Asia Initiative Steering Committee, and our amazing undergrad student coordinators who are sitting over there. Ananya, Kurshi, Bhavika, and Kritika, thank you. So this annual lecture series honors the work of Dr. Ashis Nandy, who is one of South Asia's and indeed the world's foremost public intellectuals. In his more than 6 decades of scholarship, Dr. Nandy has shown fearless and consistent moral courage. In one of his interviews, he called himself an intellectual street fighter. His writings, prescient and original, are also often humorous, sardonic, and provocative. Anyone who's read Dr. Nandy's work will recognize that in addition to his astute observations about our psychic, social, and political states, a sharp and dazzling wit runs through all of his work. As the adage goes, you may disagree with him, but you cannot ignore him. Take, for example, some of the titles of his most well-known books and essays. A Very Popular Exile, or How to Live Happily with Torture, or Breakfast with Evil, or how he describes the changing face of democracy. In today's democracies, he writes, citizens are free to vote, consume, travel, and entertain themselves to death. Or how he describes cricket as, quote, an Indian game accidentally discovered by the British. His use of humor turns commonsensical assumptions on their head. Ashis Nandy is never boring. It's perhaps already a cliche to say that we are living through exceptional times, both in India and the United States. The bodies of journalists, students, including some of our own here at UCSD, academics, and even comedians have become the battlegrounds for what it means to live in a free and open democratic society. As these battles take more and more casualties, it can feel easy to lose hope, to become cynical or nihilistic, or just feel like you want to bury your head in the sand. But those reactions are the privileges of those among us who get to sit on the sidelines. It's truly a testament to those among us, like Manisha Pande, who choose in this moment, when the stakes couldn't be higher, to protect our most fundamental and cherished rights, to communicate freely, to question any and all received wisdoms, and to seek the truth. Manisha is a managing editor at News Laundry, one of India's foremost independent news outlets. And when I say independent, I really mean independent. News Laundry does not take money from corporate advertisers, nor does it take money from the government. It relies on a subscription model, which is really amazing. And Manisha hosts a weekly satirical YouTube show called TV Newsance that regularly garners more than 1 million views per episode. In 2016, she won the prestigious Ramnath Goenka Award for investigative journalism. Week after week, Manisha offers a searing and often hilarious critique of the highly corporatized and compromised Indian media landscape. Her commentaries reveal how megalomaniac news anchors, like magicians, conjure an alternate reality on a nightly basis, and how they seem steadfastly committed to entertaining us to death rather than informing us. Her work shows us how the media, one of the foundational pillars of democracy, can be used to manipulate and misinform an entire population. And yet, while never shying away from the dangers, Manisha deftly navigates us through this topsy-turvy world. She shows us how humor can render bare, with acute precision, the absurdity of the worlds we are currently inhabiting, both in the US and in India. In these Orwellian times, making the wrong joke, or even thinking of making the wrong joke, can land you in prison. To laugh in the face of authoritarianism is a profoundly political act. Manisha reminds us that humor can disrupt the operations of power in a way that nothing else can. Thank you, Manisha, for traveling here all the way from Delhi. We're delighted to have you. Thank you for making us think and for making us laugh. And we're delighted to welcome you as our Uma and Ashis Nandy Forum speaker.
Thank you so much, South Asia Initiative, for having me here all the way from New Delhi. I'm still a little jet lagged, but this is my first time in the US, and it's been really amazing to see this lovely country, and especially California. What I want to do for the next 1 hour is to give you guys a peek into the world of Indian television news. I want to tell you what's so special and unique about it, and I want to tell you guys what I do as a journalist who's chosen satire and humor to hold the media accountable. India has about 400 news channels, and over the last 15 years, my work has been to look at these news channels, look at the sort of news that they give us every night on prime time, look at corporate ownership, look at how political interests cloud newsroom decisions, look at fake news, look at misinformation and propaganda. Why TV news? Because TV news continues to be the most consumed medium when people want news in India. Reading a newspaper is still a very aspirational act in India. We're not a fully literate society, so young students often pick up English newspapers because they want to improve their language, or they pick up newspapers because they want to improve their general knowledge to crack that competitive exam. But when people want their daily dose of news, they're most likely to tune into television news channels, either on YouTube. Remember, we have great mobile and internet penetration in India, so you have a lot of people, even in rural India, who watch television news on YouTube, or they turn on their TV news to watch the news of the day to find out what's happening in their city or in their country. Some of the problems that we see with TV news today have existed for a long time, right? Politicians have always wanted to use journalists for propaganda. There's always been a conflict of interest because a lot of the owners who own news channels also have business interests. So a businessman could have a news channel, but could also have mining interests, or could be, running a university. So when you're supposed to be doing business with the government, it's very difficult to have the other arm of your business question that very government that you're supposed to be working with. So a lot of the problems in the Indian media landscape aren't new, like I said, corporate ownership, political interference. But something decidedly changed for me as someone who critiques the news in 2016, where I saw that news became decidedly anti-people. And I'll get to that in a bit, but before that, 2014 onwards, we start seeing a shift across mainstream news channels that are shaping public discourse in India. We see that the job of the nightly newsman or newswoman was to prop up the cult of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The anchor would come every day and tell you how good he is, how energetic he is, how he has the best ideas for the country, how under his leadership we're going to beat China, we're going to be global leaders. There's nothing wrong that the Prime Minister could do, or there's nothing wrong that the Bharatiya Janata Party could do. Night after night, anchors would tell you how our time had finally arrived and India's finally being saved by this amazing person who has all the answers to all our problems. The opposition, on the other hand, could do no good. Okay, they are corrupt, they are terrible, we cannot trust them. Their allegiances don't even lie with India. They have masters in China and they are, being manipulated by Chinese influences, or they have, some sort of allegiance to the Pakistani spy service. Their patriotism is to be questioned. They're not really servicing national interests. So the opposition could do no good, and the Prime Minister could do no bad. And just to give you guys a bit of context, or just to make it more relatable, today in India, an average news consumer has a choice of a variety of Fox Newses to choose from, right? There's certainly nothing on the left. There's nothing in the center. There's just a lot of Fox News and different varieties. So you have a channel that's like Fox News. There's a channel that's like Fox News into 5. There's a channel that's Fox News into 100. And there's a channel that's Fox News on cocaine. And the one on cocaine would tell you how the Prime Minister's energy and the secret to his amazing energy is this magical mushroom found in Himalayas. So that's what you're really seeing. And the absurdity of the Indian news television ecosystem's obsession with how the opposition is terrible and that how everything that's wrong with this country is the fault of the opposition, even though it's the BJP that's been in power for 10 years. The absurdity of all of it really came through over the last 2 months. There was a terrible incident in Pahalgam in Kashmir. It was a terror attack, one of the worst in the histories of Kashmir. Innocent people with their families were at a picnic spot, a very popular one in Kashmir. They were, just holidaying. About 4 gunmen came in, shot them point blank. We lost about 26 people. And this is a this is a tourist place, right? It's one of the most popular tourist places in Kashmir. Everyone goes there. It's also the most highly militarized zone. So the natural question would come for a journalist after this attack would be, what was our intelligence service doing? Who's really in charge of security in Kashmir? It's the people in power at the center, the Bharatiya Janata Party government. They govern or control every aspect of security in this region. So questions have to be asked of them. How could 4 people just walk into this picnic spot, shoot people at gunpoint, and how did we really lose these lives? India was very angry at that point, but to channel that anger and to make those lives really count, we needed a media that would question the government on what it was doing. Instead, you had news anchors questioning the opposition, which had nothing to do with the security in Kashmir. And I just want to play a little sample of that for you guys to just give you a sense of what I go through. Yeah. So this is a show that I did. Like Saiba said, I do a weekly satire show where I look at everything that's happening in television news and I tell people why what's being served to you on a nightly basis is not news. It's called TV Newsance, supposed to be a pun on news and nuisance. So the news that you're being served is nuisance. But here's a little segment that I culled out for you guys, where some of it is in Hindi, so it may be a little difficult for you to understand, but I'll try and translate as we watch it. But what the anchors started doing here, first, the reporters who are based in Kashmir say that there are important questions that need to be asked. The anchor, who's really the show person of the show, cuts the person in and just stops that questioning right there. Then you have another anchor who talks about how the Prime Minister and the Home Minister and their aura and their energy, it's sending really strong signals. It's really like at a level of like, it's all in the mind right now. There are no facts. We're just talking about what the Prime Minister is thinking, what his aura is like, what they're going to do, what sort of message we're going to send to Pakistan. All this is being talked about on national news. And then the anchor blames the state government, which has nothing to do with the security in that region, and gets scolded by one of the panelists, but I don't want to give it all up. So just watch it, and then I'll come back to it.
It's not as if reporters did not ask questions. Take Aaj Tak's Ashraf Wani, for example. He was reporting from the ground, and he mentions a major security lapse. Guess what happens then?
होम मिनिस्ट्री की तरफ से और उच्च अधिकारी की तरफ से और इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसीज की तरफ से कि सुरक्षा में चूक हुई है। ये मजाक नहीं है। 2000 टूरिस्ट किसी एक पिकनिक स्पॉट पे हैं, वहां पर ना ही पुलिस बल की कोई तैनाती, ना ही सुरक्षा बलों की कोई तैनाती। हम देखते हैं जब अमरनाथ यात्रा होती है 10 मीटर, आपने भी देखा होगा, 10
एक बड़ी खबर हम बता देते हैं अशरफ।
Before he can even finish his sentence, cut, poof, studio bulletin time. Don't focus on the lapse. Look how Modi Shah are in action mode. The next day, Amit Shah met families of the victims. Almost every channel ran the visuals. But did you hear any audio?
I'm speaking over these pictures because there is no sound in these pictures. The sensitivity of the families is being preserved. their very private grief and their words to the Home Minister in this one-on-one meeting with him is being dignified.
Wait a second, wait there and repeat. You can see this woman. You can see her expression, her gestures, and you can almost guess the question she's asking the Home Minister. Weren't you the one who said Kashmir is now safe, that terrorism is over? The shock is visible, the pain is clear, but the audio conveniently missing. None of the channels had the audio of this interaction. Not ANI, not All India Radio, not Republic, not India Today, no one. वैसे तो आम तौर पे टीवी न्यूज वालों को ये भी पता रहता है कि कब मोदी जी के हलक से खाना नहीं उतरा.
प्रधानमंत्री ने स्टेट डिनर कैंसिल कर दिया भाई कि मेरे हलक से खाना नहीं उतरेगा, ऐसे हालात हैं.
The focus even.
That's an anchor saying that the Prime Minister did not eat the whole night because he was so shocked. I have no idea how he knows that or what high sources told him that the Prime Minister did not eat, but let's go with that.
After 26 deaths is देखो अमित शाह और मोदी जी कैसे आतंकवादियों को सबक सिखाने के लिए तैयार हैं.
अमित शाह का चेहरा आपको बता रहा है कि वो इस वक्त जो हुआ है उसको लेकर बहुत तनाव में है.
न्यूज एंकर्स बीजेपी वालों का चेहरा देखकर ही सारी फीलिंग समझ जाते हैं.
जब देश का गृह मंत्री वहां जाएगा इसका मतलब यह है कि सुरक्षा चाक चौबंद है और मैं यहाँ एक गार्जियन के तौर पर मौजूद हूँ. देखूं जरा कौन करता है इस तरीके की बुज़दिलाना हरकत अगेन.
रूबिका आपा बुज़दिलाना हरकत करके टेररिस्ट चले गए. होम मिनिस्टर गार्डियन के तौर पे थोड़ा पहले खड़े होते तो वो शायद बेटर होता.
अब ये तस्वीर साफ साफ ये बता रही है कि एक बड़ा ऑपरेशन होने वाला है जल्दी.
यस, बड़े ऑपरेशन का अंदाजा हमें उमर अब्दुल्ला के चेहरे से ही पता चल गया. Just see his face.
एक मैसेज दिया जा रहा है भारत सरकार द्वारा कि देश का गृह मंत्री, प्रदेश का मुख्यमंत्री और प्रदेश का लेफ्टिनेंट गवर्नर तीनों पहलगाम में रुकेंगे. श्रीनगर में नहीं, पहलगाम में रुकेंगे, ग्राउंड जीरो पे. सिक्योरिटी apparatus is up.
So instead of asking questions of the government of the day, most anchors were talking about how the Prime Minister and the Home Ministers landed in Kashmir, and that's a strong message, and that's all we need to focus on. My favorite part comes now.
Excitement all over news channels for basic protocol. I mean, this is the least governments can do after such a massive terror attack. But here's the thing. Even these anchors realized after a while कि भाई कुछ तो सवाल पूछना पड़ेगा. लोग गुस्सा हैं, viewers want answers. Someone has to be held accountable. Enter Arnab Goswami, the master of misdirection.
But how can the Supreme Court tell the government that you have elections in Kashmir by September 2024? What have elections in Kashmir got us?
His solution? Blame the Supreme Court.
There was no need, in my view, for the Supreme Court to waste time getting into whether 370 abrogation was valid or not. It was a waste of time.
सब ये judges की गलती है. Next, blame the state government.
And what have we achieved by making Omar Abdullah a decorative chief minister?
So here the anchors blaming the state chief minister, saying that, it's all his fault.
Abdullah did not even care to have Jammu and Kashmir police deployment. What is under him, what is under his watch, he has done absolutely nothing. There was no Jammu and Kashmir police personnel out there.
When you don't have answers, just deflect. Add fake news, stir in some rage, and serve hot.
I hope you see closely Omar Abdullah's face tonight, and I hope it shows some sense of guilt, because I've been told the JK police is non-existent in these areas.
Arnab repeatedly blamed the Omar Abdullah government, insisting that the JNK police report to him. And it's his fault that JNK police was missing in action. Except JNK is a union territory. The police reports to the LG, who reports to the Home Ministry. The police is not under Omar Abdullah. Arnab, थोड़ा सा research कर लेते यार बोलने से पहले. A panelist precisely pointed this out, and it was just priceless.
कैसे हुआ ये? कैसे सिक्योरिटी किनके हाथ में है? गवर्नर के हाथ में पूरा सिक्योरिटी आती है? होम मिनिस्टर के हाथ में आती है? कैसे हुआ ये?
The guy's expression is just something else. He's stunned कि अर्नब आपको इतनी बेसिक चीज नहीं पता?
जम्मू एंड कश्मीर पुलिस किसके अंदर आती है?
होम मिनिस्टर के अंदर आती है, लेफ्टिनेंट गवर्नर के अंदर आती है.
So here the stunned panelist is basically telling the anchor that you don't know your facts. The police is not under the chief minister. It reports to the central government.
पता नहीं है? आपको पता नहीं है?
आपको पता नहीं है? नहीं पता है भाई, कहाँ पता है? अर्नब को कुछ नहीं पता है. I think अर्नब के producers did try and tell him कि भाई अर्नब पुलिस LG के अंडर आती है, but he just shut her off.
जम्मू एंड कश्मीर पुलिस किसके अंदर आती है?
Hello, Arnab. You're wrong. The police reports to LG, not Umar Abdullah. Government, please correct yourself. Correct yourself, Arnab. Please correct yourself.
Ek minute, radio, don't talk to me now. 1 second. Don't talk to me now.
So I think his producer was telling him in the earpiece that you're wrong, but he kept shutting the producer up. So that's the absurdity of what we're seeing today when, I mean, you can't even fact check this. This is just fantasy. But coming back to what I was saying earlier, 2016, there's propaganda. But around 2016, things change, and the media now is no longer just serving up people in power or propping up people in power or, you know, building this cult around them. They also turn decidedly anti-people. So it's no longer about, you know, praising Modi, but it's also about targeting those who don't agree with his politics or who don't agree with his policies. The first target, university students in campuses and colleges. There's a protest in 2016 in one of India's premier institutes, Jawaharlal Nehru Institute. It turns bad. There are some ugly slogans chanted there. We still don't know who chanted those slogans because the police hasn't been able to find out exactly. The students' union there says, okay, we don't agree with these slogans, but there's a sedition case slapped on them. Okay, sedition is a law that the British used to curtail protests by Indians. And there's a terror case slapped on them, and the media just latches onto it. There's a term coined called Tukde Tukde Gang, which literally means Break India Gang. And this, for months on, news channels, anchor after anchor, every night starts targeting these pesky student protesters. They have nothing to do. They sit on the campus. They occupy spaces. They ask questions. Why should the taxpayer fund this? Why should we be paying to make sure that these students who are not studying in campuses but protesting for all sorts of causes, why on earth should we support them? These guys are anti-nationals. We need to stop it. So students really become this evil target that channels choose. From students, it moves on to Muslim women who are protesting against the citizenship law in India, which they believe is going to make their citizenship in India really tenuous. So there's a peaceful protest. They occupy a neighborhood. There's singing, there's poetry, there's food. And again, there's a vicious campaign around the fact that these women have been paid by Pakistani spies to sit there. They're here to destabilize India. Oh, they're causing traffic jams. Why are they doing this? It's such an inconvenience to the taxpayer. Or that they're stupid. They don't even know what they're protesting about. They're just here because they want free biryani. Or they're being paid. And the same sort of formula we see every night, is just that the villains change. So there's the student protester, then there are Muslim women, there are the farmers who are protesting against farm laws. They feel that parts of it, they won't suit us. So there's a long protest that the farmers put up, and they are villainized as Khalistanis, as, again, terror supporters. And again, they're stupid. They have not read. It's something that concerns their livelihood, but apparently they're misguided and they don't know what they're talking about. So there's a formula now on Indian news where you have three main sets of villains. It's students/opposition, protesters, anyone who doesn't agree, anyone who dissents, anyone who may have a different idea from the governing party. And the third is Muslims. And this is the most diabolical part of what's happening around in India today, where every night news anchor's job is to make the majority community feel scared about what the Muslim is going to do to them. So there are all sorts of jihads invented. There's love jihad, which is that a Muslim man can lure unsuspecting poor Hindu women, convert them, because it's so simple to lure women. You just have to wear a tilak and a kalawa, and women lose it, apparently. So there's love jihad. There's, believe it or not, there's been a news debate on video game jihad. The conspiracy is on primetime news. I'm talking about one of the most watched channels in India. The conspiracy that the anchors put forward is that young children, while playing Fortnite, are converted by other Muslim video gamers. So Fortnite was contentious because there's apparently a video game jihad that's happening. One of the most odious forms of jihad, again invented on primetime news, thuk jihad, which literally means spitting. A jihad where apparently Muslim restaurant owners, Muslim cooks, Muslim hotels They spit in food because they want to contaminate it for the Hindus. The idea is to really go after livelihood. The idea is to question every aspect of the Muslim being in India, who they love, how they pray, how they dress, their businesses, everything is suspect. The message is that, you may not have a job, that's okay. Look at what the Muslim in your neighborhood is doing. You may have poor health infrastructure, or your kids don't have good schools to go to, but look at that Muslim praying on the road, doing the namaz on the road, creating a nuisance. And again, it has reached at such a point that I take again an example from the recent clash between India and Pakistan, where there was cross-border shelling, and a number of Indians who live along the line of control died. About 21 civilians died in this. One of them was a Muslim man, Qari Muhammad Iqbal. He's a 40-year-old teacher. News channels painted him as a Pakistani terrorist. This is an Indian civilian who dies on Indian soil, but on news, the anchors say that, victory. Indian army has neutralized a terrorist in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. They flash his face all over television news. There's not even an apology. There's a sort of a feeble, correction that's put out by some channels, but most channels don't apologize. They flash his face all over. And we at News Laundry visited the family, and they were stunned and they were sad. Not only are they having to deal with the fact that they've lost a family member, they turn on the TV and they say, oh, he's apparently a terrorist. And remember that a lot of families who live along the border, they're really the lifeline for the army. So they really help with supplies, and especially in the Poonj area, these communities are very essential to the armed forces there and their workings there in terms of the sort of help and logistics they may provide. So here, a Muslim man who dies because of Pakistani shelling is called a terrorist, and there's no consequences. And I just want to play that for you here.
Nobody in television media thought it was important to focus on these lives lost at the behest of Pakistani shelling. Instead, they were focused on demonizing these very lives we lost.
Qari Muhammad Iqbal, Lashkar terrorist religious preacher, also killed in Kotli operation. This is under Kotli Operation Sindoor, of course. Can you give us a little bit of a background on this individual? I'm sure he must have popped up on your radar and your grid, and maybe even your crosshairs at some point.
So essentially, he was not technically a terrorist operation leader. He was the motivator. He was the radicalizer.
This man held a debate calling an Indian citizen a terrorist, and he has still not apologized for his mistake as we record this show. News 18 Hindi ने sorry तो बोल दिया, लेकिन अभी तक at the time of recording this show, they still have videos up claiming that this innocent citizen who died at the hands of Pakistan is a terrorist. This week, the News Laundry team met Qari's family, who was obviously livid at everything that had happened to them.
किसी ने मोबाइल खोला, देखा तो कि उसके ऊपर न्यूज़ चल रही है. न्यूज़ वालों ने, 80 न्यूज़ वालों ने और कुछ गोदी मीडिया चैनल वालों ने बताया कि ये हमने बहुत बड़ा आतंकी मार डाला है कारी इकबाल. बहुत बड़ा आतंकी था, बहुत बड़ा. यहाँ तक बताया कि ये पुलवामा का मास्टरमाइंड था.
तो हमारी दाढ़ी और टोपी को देख के मिलिटेंट करार देते हैं ये मीडिया.
He's saying that just because I wear a cap, a skull cap, and I have a beard, they think we are militants. And there's a term he uses, Godi media, which a lot of Indians now use for media, which essentially translates to lapdog media. That a media that services power, it doesn't talk about our issues, it doesn't talk about public interest.
इसको गोदी मीडिया का इसीलिए अटैक लगा है.
अब इस वजह से इन्होंने क्या हो गया कि उनके सर पे टोपी थी और मुंह पे दाढ़ी थी. उस वजह से हो सकता है उन्होंने सोचकर कहा कि ये दाढ़ी टोपी वाला होकर ये एक उनको नहीं, इसका मतलब सब मुसलमानों को टारगेट किया इन्होंने.
गोदी जीवीज अपने ही लोगों को पाकिस्तानी बोल रहे हैं, अपने ही लोगों को टेररिस्ट बोल रहे हैं, तो हमें कोई एक्सटर्नल दुश्मन की क्या जरूरत है? फूट तो ये लोग दिन रात खुद ही डालते हैं. Nobody.
So yeah, an Indian citizen gets called a terrorist, and this is again very routine. Like this is one, story, but night after night, I'm encountering stuff like this where anyone can be called a terrorist because of their faith. Like I said, how you pray, who you love, what you eat, everything is under, question. And this becomes the nightly agenda for news. So news is not talking about economy, job losses, health, infrastructure, Sometimes it's not even talking about an accident or a grave tragedy that's occurred somewhere, an earthquake or a flood, but it's constantly feeding this nightly frenzy of fear and anger to people. And why, I chose satire and humor to kind of tackle with this is honestly, first up, it is self-preservation because I've been doing this for so long. But the volley of propaganda that even I was encountering was so hard to make sense of. And sometimes the only reaction to it was to laugh at it. That I realized maybe that's the best way to kind of cut through this. Maybe we can find, make fun of this, mock it, so that you reduce the intensity of what they're trying to say and you reduce it for the audience that is supposed to be the victim of this propaganda. And I strongly feel that the audiences that watch propaganda or that believe in fake news or who like watching these nightly angry hate fests are also victims. And I don't think they're necessarily stupid. A lot of people know that what's being served to them is possibly a lie, but they're scared and they want comfort. They want the comfort of their worldview being, acknowledged by someone, or they want, it's nice to have an anchor, cater to the same prejudices that you have. So a lot of people watch it, and I think what was important for me as a journalist was to make sure that I'm not talking down to these people. I'm talking with them. I'm trying to start a conversation with them. I'm trying to say that, okay, let's set our political interests aside. Let's set our political differences aside. Let's focus on what news is supposed to be doing. You may have a political party preference, but journalism is supposed to be talking about the issues that matter to you, right? We all have children at home who are worried about whether they're going to get jobs or not. Education is a big concern among a lot of parents. And these are things that we bond on, right? Whether you support Modi or you don't, everyone cares about their children, right? Everyone cares about the quality of the hospital in their neighborhood. So satire and humor helps me use what is common with us, and also drive home the point by telling people that, you need to expect better of news. So that's one of the things that humor allows me to do. It disarms you, it builds empathy. And now I think, luckily, we're at this point in India where a lot of even supporters of the government feel that it's gone too far. That, we may support a certain party, but there are a lot of issues that we are facing, and we need a news that caters to those issues. We need the news person to talk about what's going on with us. So that is one thing that I think we have been really able to achieve by having a conversation in not a lectury way. I'm not here to lecture you and preach and or scold you at what you're watching or why you're watching this, or train you into believing something else. You're most welcome to have your political beliefs, but I'm here to just kind of tell you that journalism should not be, about painting people in a way that isn't true. It's not about hate. It's not about feeding your most base anxieties and fears. One of the things that my show also does is to really talk about media literacy. I think in India, where we aren't really very discerning about the sort of news we consume, it's important for people to even understand basics of what a journalistic report should look like. What should you be looking for when you're looking for your news source? What should you be suspect of when you hear of a story? And I'll end with this last video, which kind of looks into this aspect of my work. There was, in 2018, like I said, like after the assault on universities and students and really painting these guys as evil that we have to tackle, there was a case where a bunch of activists, intellectuals, were accused of terror activities. It's a very convoluted case, and if I get into it, it'll take me another hour. But the reporting on this was really problematic because a lot of the news channels were taking, plants from the police and running it as truth. One of the conspiracies that came around this time was that there was a plot to kill the Prime Minister. Right now, this plot was so dangerous that the police didn't go to the court with it. They went to the media with it. They went to the anchors and said, hey, why don't you talk about this plot to kill the Prime Minister, which is this plot which includes communists, it includes Islamists, it has the opposition party involved, it has your most pesky intellectuals involved. So it's like this mishmash of, I don't know, evil Avengers who've got together to take on the Prime Minister, and every channel runs with that these bunch of people are here to, kill the Prime Minister. And like I said, the absurdity of this was that this plot by the police never reaches the court. It's never even argued in the court. There's no evidence presented about this to the court. It is simply circulated in television news channels to create a frenzy among people and to create a perception that these guys, these intellectuals especially, are out to assassinate the Prime Minister. So we did a little, silent film to kind of tell people what journalists should do when the police comes and, plants stuff and tells you that, this is what we think is happening. So I'll just play that and then... That's the plant. This is what actually happened. That is how news debates look like in India. It's not very accurate. Moving on to... So a lot of our work is also to kind of, explain to people what they should be expecting from the news. And I think humor works when it's rooted in truth. I cannot just go there and crack a joke and, think it's funny and expect people to like it. We do a lot of research. We make sure that what we're trying to say is as accurate as possible, is as fair as possible, is as balanced as possible. So we use all the tools of a journalist. So everything that we say or do has to be journalistically accurate, but we say it in a language that is more familiar to young people, that's more familiar to, people who may not usually like to, log on to News Laundry, or people who feel that, this is left biased media. So we're also trying to reach out to people who, may not have the same ideological sort of bent as everyone else. So that's it from me. I think we can take some questions now. I'd be happy to answer your questions and we can keep it chatty.
Thanks so much for a great talk. I was wondering if you could reflect on some of the risks of using humor, because in a way it might, irritate people in power than would a kind of a straight way of presenting things. And potentially for people who disagree with you, perhaps it could prove alienating, not so appealing. I can definitely see the value of humor for appealing to people who are kind of cast out, who are sort of on the outside of whatever the current system is, as a way of kind of bringing joy in a time of darkness. Yeah, as a tool for connecting with people who disagree, I just wonder what your reflections are on that.
So, what kind of trouble it may get us into? That was your first part, right? Well, we have currently, we have about a number of IT cases on news laundry. So we're fighting that with the government. But so that's just, I think that's just part of being a journalist in India now. You could come, and there's no way that you can protect yourself from that. Even if you don't do what you're doing, you could just have an inquiry, an income tax raid or a survey, or the police walk in, search your offices. So that's something else. But I think that I personally have found humor to be more effective, especially while dealing with people who may not necessarily agree with me, or let's say people who vote for Modi, for example, right? Because I think the way we word it is also, we're very conscious about the fact that we're never preaching people about their political choices. And we're not trying to tell them who to vote for. We're trying to give you the tools to make the decision of who you should vote for. And our advocacy, whatever I try to do through humor and satire, is to tell people that, expect better of your media, so it equips you with all the knowledge that you need to then question your representative, and then go ahead, support them if you want to, or don't support them if you don't want to. And I think people are surprisingly open, because the level of absurdity is such. I mean, the recent case, for example, with the India-Pakistan conflict, I saw that people were genuinely very terrified. The prospects of war is scary for most people, except for news anchors who rake in a lot of money with all the, war programming. People along the borders, of course, but even regular people staying in these states that were affected were very, very scared. They wanted to know what's going to happen to our businesses, is there going to be a curfew, how long would this go on? And when they turned on the TV, they couldn't find answers to any of this. And irrespective of, in situations like this, whatever you may believe in, whether you think this was the good thing for the government to do or whatever your belief is, you want credible information. So I think we have an easy job to communicate that. And we're able to do that. And I find that I at least see under my YouTube comments, a lot of people say that, I like Modi, but okay, you're right here. So, I don't agree with you on everything, but okay, this was funny. Because I think what we're talking about is really basic stuff, right? Don't call someone a terrorist when they're not, right? Don't every night tell me about how the Muslim is trying to, take over my property, or, trying to, change my food habits or convert me, when I'm really concerned about my child's college education. So I think I find humor to be effective to say this. And another thing, because of the sheer hatred that we are seeing on news, like I said, the Islamophobia is very real, and it's very concentrated, and it's relentless. I think a lot of people are turning away from news because it's too much. And even among minority communities, I often meet like young Muslim kids who say, we don't want to watch any of this, we don't want to be political. It kind of depresses them, that we don't want to engage anymore with this, we just want to go on, do our job. And I think for those sets of people also, making fun of it just makes it easy to deal with. And you find a way to engage with what's happening by just keeping it light, but still meaty. I mean, it shouldn't get frivolous at any point. Yes, like I was saying, we're 8 years ahead of you when it comes to crack down on. We're the pioneers.
Manisha, thank you so much. So in our family, we have our own family channel on WhatsApp.
Yes.
And so I see sometimes an Indian news being shown, and then the BBC and the New York Times, and they immediately claim that BBC and New York Times are biased.
Yeah, George Soros has funded all of them. Everything is a conspiracy.
That's right. And they don't want to believe any of those external media or any what the Indian news media is saying. So how do you respond to, how do you deal with such a situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny because every time there's, when you have anyone in the foreign press, for example, just recently, I have so many examples from the recent clash because it's fresh in my memory, but, when I think it was the New York Times that said that India hit all the targets that it intended to in Pakistan. All these guys who trashed New York Times were sharing it. That, look, the New York Times has said it. Now you better believe it. And when it says something, when it's about press freedom in India or, anything else, it's suddenly, this is a conspiracy. And the conspiracies are often like, there's a mishmash of like communists and Americans are supposedly in it together. And then the CIA, and there's, ISI involved in all of this. So I think what we try and do is we precisely use this flip that, if you can't have it your way, if you're going to not believe them, then don't believe them for anything, even when they praise Modi or even when they say we did what we had to do. So then, you can't gloat over that New York Times piece. So typically when I want to communicate that in a show, I always use things, because there's obviously good things also happening in the country which do get reported. So I use that, but I think with, again, this is also this, suspicion of foreign media. When the BBC got raided in India, there were basically raids in the BBC offices, and there were surveys. The news channels were cheering it, Anchors came on that night and said, this is great. This BBC needs to be shown its place. You should jail them. What right do they have to be in our country and say whatever they have to? So this is again a very vicious sort of propaganda that's been drummed into Indians for almost 10 years now, that everyone outside is out to get you. They can't tolerate India's success, or there's some sort of global jealousy, conspiracy. So yeah.
Hi, thank you. You mentioned there are literally hundreds of these TV news channels, and I guess they're all run on a for-profit basis.
Yeah.
How do they survive? How do they pay their way?
So typically in India, there are two ways. One is a news organization is often a front for a businessman as a power thing, So you could be like one of the infrastructure companies, which is very big in the South, owns a television news channel. Ambani's own a television news channel. Adani now owns a television news channel. So these may be loss-making enterprises, but I think there's a lot of corporate support for it because it's precisely just sort of a PR arm for the corporation. The other thing is advertisements, and increasingly now government advertisements. You almost, for example, when the Kumbh was happening, you had about half an hour of ad programs that the UP government ran across channels. And these ads would look like news. It would mimic exactly like a news show. So you would have an anchor, you have the headlines, but it's paid for by the media, by the state government. So governments actually are one of the biggest financiers of news channels. This isn't just the BJP government, even state governments routinely place ads. I think we had done one story actually with one specific UP government advertisements that had gone for 2 years. I think it was almost about 500 crore to one channel. The top channel got about 500 or so. Can range up to 1,700 crores. So governments are a big funder. And then the third thing is very important, is that all channels have events. So every channel has a conclave, right? So where you call, you have to have the Prime Minister headlining that, and you get a lot of corporate sponsorship for that. So these are like 3-day events and festivals, which are essentially about people in power who come and chit-chat with the journalist or with the anchor. These are, again, big money spinners for these channels. And again, you will not have the Prime Minister sit with you for your conclave if you're going to critique him for the rest of the year. So that's one of the calculated ways in which they've also been able to really kind of make sure that news anchors are obedient.
Yeah. Hello. Thanks for the opportunity. I heard a few years back the Quint tried to get a TV news channel license, and the government did not give it to them, and they had stopped giving news channel licenses for many years. So do channels like Quint, Wire, yourselves, do you plan to try and attempt to get a news TV channel license via court, like now that it's established and undeniable that you people are also part of the news, whatever lien you may have?
Not at all. I think TV should die. I'm not a fan of TV at all. And honestly, it's people critique internet quite a bit, and YouTube and digital, mediums. There are problems with that, but I have found YouTube as a publisher really exciting as a news person. I've been able to reach people in villages who would never come to my website, So I find digital medium very powerful. I find it very immediate. I find that the audience is very engaged. I find that, they're able to kind of critique me back very quick. Like the feedback is very quick with digital. So and it's nimble. I think news, and especially with the model that we have, where we do not want to take corporate advertisements, we don't want to take government advertisements, so we're never going to be raking in the big bucks. We want to be sustainable to be able to carry on our reportage and our shows with, like, say, a team of 60 people. And with that, we want to stay nimble. So the moment you put in your investments in studios and lights and the setups that TV require, you're going to then, you will have to end up doing this. Because you'll have to sustain that 24/7 cycle. You'll have to make that money. You'll have to rake in the advertisement that you need to keep it sustaining. So I find digital platforms very freeing. There are issues with it, of course. But overall, I think it helps you stay nimble. It helps you reach a very large audience. Your discoverability is great. And you can really experiment. So I'm happy to be a YouTube channel.
But aren't most of the
But yes, Quint did apply for a business channel and they didn't get it.
But aren't most of the viewership still on mainstream TV? So won't you miss out on a lot of them?
So the problem is we don't have good data on this. We have the only way to measure this is TRPs, which have a really small subset. Very few homes where they're measuring this. They're easily rigged. There's been a lot of scams around television news channels rigging their numbers. I feel that digital penetration is quite at par. So see, when a big thing happens, like an earthquake, people are likely to turn on the television to watch the news. But on a daily basis, if they want news, I think a lot of them go to digital channels now. So it's not there yet, but I think it's growing quite fast. And I think increasingly people want to get away from the clutter of TV and choose, what they want to watch on YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
So I was curious about the operations of foreign and independent media in India, because a lot of the time when I try to look up current events in India on UK or US based news websites, there's very little information. Does that tie into the larger ecosystem of only some viewpoints are tolerated by the Indian government, and how does that work and limit information available to people outside of India?
So, broadly, I think it's a question of editorial decisions that somebody in New York or Washington would make. So maybe every story is not exciting for them, so they wouldn't want a story. So some of it is just purely the fact that they, care maybe more about what's happening in China than in India. So you're not going to commission those kind of reports in India. But yes, foreign journalists who've been working in India do say that over the last 10 years, the access to government has really reduced. So if they want to meet the government, to know their line, or to understand what's happening, there are very few avenues to do that. The second thing is a lot of areas where typically foreign journalists would want to report, like say Kashmir, or even the Northeast, they aren't allowed to go there anymore. So that has been one hindrance. So for example, a New York Times or Washington Post would not be able to report from these conflict areas for the world. And that's also been the focus, I feel. So maybe you see a less of Indian news because of that. But I also feel it's more to do with the news choices that a New York bureau or a Washington bureau would make.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll come to you. Just 1 second, Aniket. Yeah. Unless it's a follow-up of this question. Okay.
Thank you for your excellent presentation. One worrying thing is that the threshold of the war between two nuclear power has gone down significantly. If you look at the media on either side of the border, it's all about maramari, if you understand what is maramari. No one is talking about what are the consequences of nuclear war. No one is talking about that the temperatures will drop to sub-zeros for many months. There won't be any food to eat. So how can that be changed on either side of the border? What role media can play?
If you look at the mainstream channels, and both India and Pakistan are notorious for this, they'll actually do hours of shows on just weaponry. So you have a news anchor just talking about the different kind of weapons we have versus the different kind of weapons they have. And it happens both ways. Both the countries routinely do this, that, we have this and we can destroy and kill X number of things, and they have this. So it's quite grotesque, actually, to see this sort of, glorification of arms and weapons. And it's very routine. Even when there wasn't the escalation, I call them they're like G.I. Joes almost, these anchors. And I think they wanted to join the army as kids and didn't. And so now they're living their dream of playing with toys, like guns. And they actually dress up in OGs and they're strategizing like military men. So it's quite hilarious. But I feel, and here's where I think again that we underestimate people. The media propaganda may be intense, but I think people get what a war may mean for them, and especially people along the border. So this time, if you'd see, there was a lot of anger from people in villages and these states that were most affected, like Rajasthan, Punjab, Jammu. They were very upset that, you are going on and talking about what you can do to Pakistan, how you're going to destroy them, how you'll take over Karachi, but you're not talking about our lives, We've lost a home, we've lost a parent, our shops have shut, our businesses are in total uncertainty, and we don't know how long this uncertainty will go on. With the current relations, it seems like, it's very tricky for people who are living along the border. So I think those impacted do recognize what a nuclear war may do to them, but it's not mirrored on television. And then the rest of the India, which is so far away from these border towns, just is happy to see it. It's like a video game. It's like a war movie, some entertainment that they derive out of, this sort of stuff. But I would not underestimate common sense among people. I think people do get that this is serious and it can really impact them in a way that they don't want.
Come to you and then to Aniket.
Thank you, Manisha. Clearly, the quote-unquote lapdog media has figured out that it's a great business model to be tapping into the primal fears of human beings. It's very profitable to spew hatred, and that's what all these mammoth media industries seem to be built on. So if you had to make the case and envision a healthy democracy where fact-based, rigorous journalism is clearly beneficial for all, how do you make the case to someone who might turn around and say, but there's no money to be made in that. There is no, what happens to all this, the whole empire that's been built around spewing hatred? How do you, on a very forget journalistic ethics and basic humanity, but how do you convince them that, hey, this is actually in all our best interests if they're just interested in, like you said, raking in money and then just call it a day? There is no incentive. What would your case be?
So you can't convince the news anchors, and I'm not going to waste my time doing that, because these guys have made very calculated career moves. I'm not even certain if all of them believe the things that they're saying, but it's a very calculated move to be relevant in the current times. You go along with what you're supposed to be doing, and you get that 1-hour interview with the Prime Minister in the run-up to elections, and that's how you stay relevant, that's how you make your money. And I don't think there's any way to convince them out of it. And a lot of anchors say this, that, we are just doing it because people want to watch it. I find that argument completely odious. it's like a drug peddler saying, I'm just giving the drugs because people want it. It's not my fault. They want it. I'm giving it to them. So I find that really ridiculous. And I think that money can be made. I mean, News Laundry is a great example in that way, that we are respectable, sustainable, profitable. We're able to pay our employees pretty well, but we've made that decision that we're going to do it while doing news, not doing reality shows. So if you're going to decide to, then do entertainment, then you should, host those proper wrestling matches or something. So I think there is money to be made in journalism, and subscriptions are a way that we find has been very valuable for us. And even if you want to go along with this model of where you don't want to, you want the ad money and you don't want your journalism to jeopardize the ad money that comes in from the government, even so, like I said, it doesn't explain the nightly hate fests that we're witnessing, right? It's no longer about propaganda or saying that the government is good or that you must support it. It's morphed into something which is completely anti-people. If, working for the public is at the core of journalism, these guys have completely upturned it, and now it's journalism is not bad. It's not bad journalism anymore. It's dangerous stuff, and it's going against the very people journalists are supposed to serve. So I can't wrap my head around any business sense that makes, and I think there's a recognition even among government today that it's gotten a bit out of hand. I mean, they'd still want to ride that tiger because during elections they need it. But I feel there's a realization among a lot of people that it's, this has gone beyond propaganda.
Aniket, then Deepthi, and then Ahana. Yep.
Thank you so very much for such an insightful talk. It was wonderful. I wanted to zero in on the humor part of it, which I found very interesting. And I wonder if you wanted to locate your work, there are so many regional traditions of humor in India, the tamasha, the bhands, there are parallels in Bengal, and the stand-up comedians now, some of them come up with pretty sharp political critiques too. And I find that pretty distinctive. That's not a part of the American media landscape at all. In a way, it is in India. I was just thinking, I think if Ashis Nandy was here, he would think along these lines too, in a way. So if you want to reflect a bit on that.
So there's one thing always very interesting that I say to everyone, that actually a politician is the most reviled person through pop culture in India and through poetry and through, so you have these Kavi Sammelans, which are like these poetry competitions, which you've had a long tradition of, where the politician would just sit and one poet after the other would come and just roast the politician. That's been a really old tradition of India, especially Banaras during the Holi. That phrase, Bura na mano, Holi hai. Holi is a festival. And you have this phrase which says that don't mind, it's holy. So when you say that, you basically, you can say anything you want to say about the politician. We don't, if you look at our movies, the most corrupt figure is always the politician, right? You're just trained to be suspicious of the politician in India. Unlike maybe in other cultures where there's a certain sort of respect, or there's a certain, even the fact that a politician has to have a perfect family, a wife and a daughter, and has to be that perfect family. All our politicians have very colorful lives, and it's never a problem for Indians. We never talk about, who they're dating, what they're doing. We somehow just take it, and it's completely okay. So therefore, I think this trend of the last 10 years of just, building this cult around Modi is very anti-India in that sense. Because we're not as such a people who are beholden by our politicians. There are songs about how terrible they are. There are sayings about how you must never trust them. There's always this sense that you have to pull him down. Like you've given him power for 5 years, now you must pull him down and show him his space, his place. That's what happened in Uttar Pradesh this election. That when I was traveling during this time, the number of people in rural India who tell me that, okay, he's good, but we want a strong opposition. We don't want him to get too, smug. So there is that understanding among a common Indian.
Thank you so much for your really fascinating talk. And I want to just echo Aniket's comment about humor being a really powerful way to puncture the outrage machine, and I really loved how you demonstrate doing that. My questions are, I have two questions. The first one is, I wonder if you could tell us more about your viewership and what kinds of people tune in to watch News Laundry. I'm curious not only about sort of demographic information, age, and so on, but I'm also really curious about regional spread. Do you find people from certain parts are more interested? And then my second question is about, you mentioned you have a team of 60 people. Could you tell us more about sort of the day-to-day functioning? How do you choose stories? How do you pursue them? Are your 60 people based in Delhi? Do you have them across India? So I'd just love to know a little bit more about the mechanics of how you do the work you do.
So the first question was about humor. Sorry, could you just repeat the first question? I just your viewers. Yeah. So viewers, we have about 2 million subscribers on YouTube. We have a healthy set of subscribers who support us. I find that our viewership on our YouTube is, the age would be about 22 to 40. That's the average age that I see. It's way more men than women, fewer women. I would say it's almost 80-20. And that's apparently good in news. The common, like the general average is that it's 10 to 90. So women tune in less, and that's a problem that we grapple with too. We want more women to kind of tune in and engage with news. A lot of people would be in metropolitan cities. So Bangalore, Delhi would be maybe our highest viewership comes from there. A lot of people overseas also. So that's the formal YouTube and our website. Now, the reels, which I've discovered are amazing. They really reach the unlikeliest of places. And I find that very interesting. I mean, I could sometimes walk into rural West Bengal and somebody would just recognize my face and just say, "Aapka reel dekha hai. Aap reel banati ho na?" Like, they just know me as this reel person. They don't know that I'm a journalist. But so short form content, I find that really, there's no telling where it goes. And it really reaches out a lot of people. A lot of Hindi speakers. We are only in Hindi and English, so we don't reach out to people in other languages, but we have a strong base among Hindi listeners and viewers. And the 60 people, so just to give you a brief, News Laundry started off in 2012. The name suggests, as the name suggests, our goal was always to report on the media, because we felt that the media could question everyone, from politicians to sports people to bureaucrats to like Bollywood actors, but there was no one to question the media. We didn't have a healthy tradition of looking at the media, so that was why we started. So News Laundry is literally like taking the news to the cleaners. That's where the name comes from. By our 4th year of existence, we realized that it's not enough to critique. We also want to set what's wrong. So we want to send our reporters on the ground. And our focus was, because talk TV was so big, because opinions were so big, we felt that reporting was kind of taking a backstage. And so 4 years into our existence, we started really focusing heavily on having a reporting team that's able to go to the ground and do, hardcore ground reportage. We have our restrictions because we started off with like 4 reporters and now we're about 15. And most of them are based in Mumbai, Delhi, and Chennai. And Chennai, actually, we have the editor. We don't have a reporter there. But we generally send reporters to places wherever there's, a train tragedy or a flood or an ecological crisis or indeed a terror attack. So they travel to those places. We're very clear about the fact that we don't want to break news. So you'll never have like a breaking news thing on News Laundry website. We choose what we can do in depth, and it's determined by multiple factors. Often, sometimes we choose something that's been completely ignored by the mainstream media. So for example, the ethnic strife in Manipur, which didn't get much space in mainstream news, we sent our reporters there for a month. Stationed 2 reporters for a month, unheard of. No one in the mainstream news did it. Sent them there for almost like, got reports from there. So there's one formula of doing things that are getting ignored. The other is shed clarity when there's conflicting reports coming in. So if there's a crime story or if there's a communal incident where we don't really know what happened and there's too much noise around it, our goal would be to then land up at that place and bring as clear a picture as possible. And the third is, of course, it's determined by the news cycle. You know, if there's a stampede at a Delhi railway station, we will cover it because we're there. So that's how we kind of decide. But one, just to add, quite a remarkable thing that we're able to manage in News Laundry is that we have these reporting projects. For example, we want to send our reporters to Manipur because it's an important news that we believe should be covered, and we're able to completely get it funded by the public. So we put up a target of this is how much it's going to cost, this is what we need, these are the resources we need, and it gets topped up by people who want to see our reporters go there and report. Subscribers are often so generous, they'll offer a car, they'll say you can come stay with us or we'll take you out for lunch. So there's a lot of good community support that we get for our reportage.
Hi, Manisha. Thank you so much. I think my question was basically answered by you just now. I was thinking back to this conversation I had with my dad about being a literary scholar, a critical scholar, like pursuing a career as an intellectual, as an armchair intellectual, confined to this.
Scariest people on earth.
Yeah, confined to this building. And I continue to get accusations leveled against me of pursuing dialectic for the sake of dialectic. And a bunch of journalistic critique that you described, you know, what you guys did for the first 4 years, like being critical of other news outlets, and then being productive, generative. I think, yeah, you pretty much answered my question. Sometimes you have to be like adding to that stream instead of picking apart, and because then you lose legitimacy.
Then you just become a nitpicker, and especially as a journalist.
Precisely.
But just to add, I often now I make it a point with my shows, while I critique news organizations, I make sure that I have a segment explaining the true facts so that people feel, okay, they're also getting something out of it. It's not just that she's just saying everyone else is shit, I'm great. So, you know, it's important to kind of also add in that hard work and say, okay, I'm also going to give you some information that you can use.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for an excellent talk. I was kind of curious about something that you sort of alluded to earlier, which is this campaign of harassment against anyone with a voice of dissent, and we're seeing that increasingly here in the US as well with higher education. And so I'm kind of curious, moving forward, in terms of sustainability of any kind of dissenting media, it almost seems like a game of chicken with the government, with this increasing campaign of harassment, and whoever manages to survive the carnage kind of makes it on the other side. And so from the point of view of someone wanting to start a channel or wanting to start something similar to News Laundry, going forward, it seems like the selection mechanism has to be that you're either brave and or have the resources to fight this kind of harassment. So I'm kind of curious about how one makes that decision to take that head on. At what point does your energy fail? And I'm curious about it also in the context of the US, where higher education is facing all of these constraints on free speech and all of that. And so how do you deal with that, and how do you stay the course?
So I always tell this to people that actually you don't need to be brave. You need good accountants and you need good lawyers. If you want to start a news business in India, make sure you have the best accountants. All your taxes are in places, all your paperwork is done. Because the thing with Indian laws, and it's better here, but the thing with Indian laws is that you can find any way to screw someone if you want to. You just have to want to see that person in jail, and you'll manage to do it, because the laws are just so tricky. So I'm very lucky that my organization has 2 brilliant accountants who've really kind of, made sure that we're absolutely correct when it comes to our paperwork, because that's what they can get you on, right? So we've been very careful with compliance. That's like the unsexy part of it, but it's what you really have to do to keep going. So you have to make sure your compliance is great. You have to make sure you have good lawyers who can put your case out. Like we currently have a case with the income tax authorities where we won it, the first round at least. So we had good lawyers. We were able to put up our case and we were heard and we won it. So, you know, that's because we, like I said, we did our paperwork and we have good lawyers. So that's very important. I also feel that I think it's important. Tragically, what's happened in India is too many people have just, you know, shut up without even being told to shut up, you know. And I think that, you know, it doesn't take too much courage to just say the basic truth, I feel. And I love this quote by this journalist who said that, you know, like, not all battles are fought to win. Some battles have to be fought so that future generations can say that someone was there fighting. So I think that's something that you really need to keep in mind, that I'm not thinking of what I'm winning or what I'm losing, but I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm correct. I'm good with my facts. I make sure that, you know, I put in that rigor. I make sure that I'm not saying something that's not correct, or I'm being, you know, frivolous with my commentary or my journalism. I put in that hard work, but then I say what I have to say. You can't get too scared before, you know, something even happens. And I feel that's often people are too scared, you know, before they should get really scared. So that's what I'd say to people who want to start something of their own, or who feel that times are hard, and, you know, say your basic truth. It's important. But say it responsibly, but say it.